In the intricate dance of human relationships and society, the concepts of framing and being framed are ever present, shaping our understanding of events, influencing perceptions, and often determining the outcome of conflicts. Whether in a courtroom, a workplace, or the realm of social interactions, the power to construct a narrative can be a tool for justice or a weapon for manipulation. Let us delve into the world of framing and being framed, exploring the psychological, social, and ethical dimensions that define these phenomena. At its core, to frame is to construct a particular perspective, to organize information and events in such a way that a specific interpretation becomes most salient. Framing is not merely about what is presented, but how it is presented. The context, the emphasis, the order, and the omission. In contrast, to be framed is to be cast within a narrative, often unfairly or deceitfully, where one's actions, intentions, or identity are distorted to fit someone else's story. The origins of framing can be traced back to the basic human need to make sense of the world. Our minds are not passive receivers of information, they are active constructors of meaning. When confronted with complex or ambiguous situations, we instinctively seek out patterns and connection, imposing order on chaos. Framing provides a cognitive shortcut, allowing us to quickly assess a situation and decide how to react. However, this very mechanism that enables understanding can also be exploited. Consider a classic scenario. In a workplace, a manager must decide who is responsible for a costly mistake. Two employees, Alex and Jordan, were involved in the project. Alex, seeking to protect their own interests, subtly shifts the narrative in conversations with the manager. They emphasize Jordan's past errors, highlight moments of indecision, and share anecdotes that paint Jordan as careless. Over time, the manager's perception shifts, not because of new evidence, but because the frame has changed. Jordan is now seen as the likely culprit, even if the facts do not support this conclusion. This is the essence of framing: the selective presentation and interpretation of information to influence beliefs and outcomes. The power of framing lies in its subtlety. Rarely is it overt or explicit. More often, it operates beneath the surface, shaping assumptions and coloring judgments without conscious awareness. On the other side of the equation is the experience of being framed. To be framed is to find oneself the target of a narrative constructed by others, often with malice or self-interest. It is a profoundly disorienting experience, marked by a loss of agency and a sense of injustice. The framed individual faces an uphill battle not only against the evidence, but against the very narrative that gives meaning to that evidence. In literature and history, the motif of the innocent person being framed for a crime they did not commit is a powerful one. It taps into our deepest fears of injustice and our yearning for truth to prevail. The story of Alfred Dreyfus, a French army officer falsely accused of treason in the late 19th century, remains a stark reminder of how framing can be weaponized by prejudice and institutional power. But framing is not limited to grand historical events or dramatic legal cases. It happens in everyday life, in the stories we tell about ourselves and others. A child blamed for a broken vase might find themselves framed by a sibling seeking to avoid punishment. A colleague passed over for promotion may be the victim of subtle framing by rivals eager to climb the corporate ladder. In each case, the narrative constructed around the individual becomes more influential than the objective facts. The psychology of framing reveals why it is so effective. Human cognition is shaped by biases and heuristics, mental shortcuts that help us process information quickly, but can also lead us astray. The framing effect is one such bias. Our decisions and judgments are influenced by how information is presented, rather than just the information itself. For instance, people are more likely to support a medical procedure if told it has a 90% survival rate rather than a 10% mortality rate, even though the two statements are logically equivalent. This malleability of perception is both a vulnerability and a strength. On one hand, it means we can be manipulated by those who control the narrative. On the other, it means we have the capacity to reframe situations, to see them from new perspectives, and to challenge unjust frames imposed upon us. In the digital age, the stakes of framing have only grown higher. Social media platforms are battlegrounds for narrative control. Information spreads rapidly, often stripped of context and nuance. A single tweet, image, or soundbite can be framed and reframed, taking on new meanings as it circulates. Viral misinformation campaigns leverage the power of framing to sow discord, undermine trust, and damage reputations. The phenomenon of trial by media exemplifies the dangers of being framed in the public eye. Individuals accused of wrongdoing may find themselves condemned in the court of public opinion before any legal process has taken place. Headlines, images, and the snippets of information are arranged to construct a damning narrative. Once the frame is set, it becomes difficult to break, even in the face of exonerating evidence. The saying, "mud sticks," captures the enduring power of a negative frame. Yet framing is not inherently malicious. It is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends on how it is used. In advocacy and activism, framing is employed to draw attention to injustices, to galvanize action, and to inspire change. The civil rights movement reframed segregation as a moral and human rights issue, rather than a matter of custom or law. Environmentalists have reframed climate change from an abstract scientific concern to a pressing ethical and existential challenge. The key difference lies in intent and transparency. When framing is used to illuminate truth, to foster understanding, and to promote justice, it can be a force for good. When it is used to deceive, manipulate, or oppress, it becomes a tool of harm. So, what can one do when faced with the prospect of being framed, or when confronted with competing frames? The first step is awareness. Recognizing that framing is at play allows us to question the narratives presented to us, to seek out alternative perspectives, and to resist being swept along by the current of dominant frames. Critical thinking is essential. This involves examining the source of information, considering what has been included and what has been omitted, and reflecting on how emotion and language shape our perceptions. It means asking questions. Whose interests are served by this frame? What assumptions underlie it? What evidence supports or contradicts it? In situations where one is at risk of being framed, documentation and transparency become vital. Keeping records, seeking witnesses, and presenting one's own narrative can help counteract false frames. It is also important to cultivate allies who can vouch for one's character and actions, providing alternative frames that challenge the dominant narrative. At a societal level, fostering a culture of fairness and due process is crucial. Institutions must be vigilant against the dangers of framing, ensuring that decisions are based on evidence and reason, rather than narrative and bias. This requires checks and balances, avenues for appeal, and a commitment to justice over expediency. The ethical dimensions of framing cannot be ignored. To frame another person unfairly is to commit a moral wrong, violating their dignity and undermining trust. Even when motivated by self-preservation or ambition, the harm caused by framing is real and lasting. Conversely, refusing to frame others unjustly and resisting efforts to frame oneself as a victim or hero without cause are acts of integrity. Ultimately, the choice to frame or be framed is a reflection of character and conscience. In a world where narratives compete and perceptions are malleable, the temptation to manipulate frames for personal gain is ever present. Yet, the long-term cost of such actions, loss of trust, damaged relationships, and a corrosive impact on society far outweighs the short-term benefits. There is also a liberating power in refusing to be defined by the frames imposed by others. History is replete with individuals and groups who have broken free from oppressive narratives, reclaiming their stories and reshaping the world in the process. Their resilience reminds us that while frames are powerful, they are not immutable. In our daily lives, we are both servers and the we tell stories about ourselves, about others, and about the world. Each story is a frame, shaping reality in subtle and profound ways. The challenge is to frame with honesty, empathy, and respect, to seek truth rather than victory, understanding rather than advantage. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, let us be mindful of the frames we construct and the frames we accept. Let us strive to see beyond the surface, to question the narratives that shape our perceptions, and to act with integrity in the face of competing frames. In doing so, we not only protect ourselves from being unfairly framed, but also contribute to a more just and compassionate society, where truth and understanding prevail over manipulation and deceit.